Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with this week in cannabis news from June 12th to the 18th. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos. Then there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. Try to think of it as a time capsule for the US cannabis industry. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up that you think will be worth more in the future than they are now, and take advantage whenever you feel ready, if you wish to do so, of course, pending any incremental reform that we are waiting for. But big news that we got this week, and while it does kick the can down the road a little bit further, it does give us some sort of a rough timeline that is hopefully done by the end of this year and not dragged into next year. And so big news from Kyle Yeager from Marijuana Moment. Scoop U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary Xavier Becerra told me today that agencies are aiming to complete their federal cannabis scheduling review this year. Stay tuned. We are working to try and get out there as quickly as we can on cannabis. And so we'll get to this article in a moment. Just wanted to share this from Nat's Fertig as it summarizes essentially what I want to say. Update on the review process. He says he wants to get it done this year. And so while it's easy for him to say that he wants to get it done, because obviously that's what we all want to hear, if we've learned anything over the last 2.5 years, it's not to trust any politicians, especially Democrats, to hit a deadline. And so while the HHS will review all the available research, they will recommend a re- or descheduling, but it's the DOJ that will ultimately make the call. And so a bit more down here as Nat elaborates on someone's question, but wanted to take you right to the article as feds aim to finish cannabis scheduling review this year. But the Food and Drug Administration under HHS is carrying out an 8-step scientific or politically scientific review into cannabis to determine, well, once the results come out, then we'll figure out if it was scientific or politically scientific, but whether it should be rescheduled, descheduled, or remain a Schedule 1. And so this part sort of irks me because all he says is what Biden told him to do 6 months ago. He's just reiterating what we were told to do. He doesn't add any detail or color into actually, making progress, which doesn't sound as promising. But then down here, it just irks me even more. He says that HHS, along with other agencies like the Drug Enforcement Agency, are working together to try and see if we can give the president an answer that's based on science and the evidence. It's not that hard to do that, but stay tuned. We hope to be able to get there pretty soon, hopefully this year. You're the ones in charge, and you're the ones whose job it is to get this done. So there should be a lot less hope, and there should be more actions taken in order to ensure that you get this done. And so, obviously, full link in the description. No doubt, it is still a massive milestone and precedent for the flower and the industry. And while it almost seems too good to be true on the surface level, at the same time, you could say that it was inevitable, just a matter of when, not if, much like SAFE and a lot of these other things lining up. And so, of course, plan accordingly for your own situation. Reason to be optimistic, but at the same time, I sort of share the view that a lot of these members of the Congressional Cannabis Caucus have shared as they react to the scheduling update, saying, "I will be disappointed if we cannot make significant progress within the year," said Rep. Earl Blumenauer. There should be a greater sense of urgency over this long overdue action. While I believe that there should be a greater sense of urgency, they're going to act when they act. I'm sure that we can all agree that we need more action and less of the empty lip service that we've gotten over the last 2.5 years. At least it's worth pointing out that some members of Congress are fighting for this plant, and while we don't have the Senate Majority Leader sadly on our side, these folks are getting sharper and sharper with their arguments as we are getting closer and closer to a tipping point. So thank you to these folks for at least fighting for us. And all that being said, just wanted to share this because I think it's very interesting, and while it's pure speculation, so take it with a grain of salt, this comes from Jason Wild, who is the executive chairman of TerraSen, and he says, "I was told 3 weeks ago by a friend who follows pharma, not cannabis, in DC, that the rescheduling work is done and sitting in a desk drawer, waiting for the perfect political opportunity, and I just wouldn't even be surprised." And then he adds, "Please do not invest based on this or any reform speculation. Of course, this is not advice. I don't. People say lots of things. I hadn't confirmed it with anyone else, but the Marijuana Moment scoop made me believe it even more." And I just got to say, Jason, it's made me believe it too. And so with that, we got this one from Marijuana Moment as well, as the House unanimously passed resolutions supporting an American imprisoned for medical cannabis in Russia. And so this is in reference to Marc Fogel, the medical cannabis patient who's been stuck there for longer than Brittany Griner. But it's like, hello, U.S. House, you missed your chance when firstly you left this guy, Marc Fogel, hanging high and dry and brought Brittany back instead for the Merchant of Death, which was possibly the worst trade in U.S. history. But then at the same time, cannabis is still federally illegal. So how are you trying to claim the moral high ground when you have however many people imprisoned for cannabis still? And so It's just ironic, the lack of self-awareness these politicians have. But on to some state news is New Jersey legal weed, more stores cleared for recreational adult use cannabis sales. And so love to see one of these states with a high population expanding and providing more legal outlets so people can vote with their dollars. But at least 3 more NJ stores approved for adult use sales are opening. 2 are expansions of medical dispensaries. The other is just recreational sales. And stores are in different counties as the state's legal weed market grows, which is promising to hear as New Jersey finally heads in the direction of becoming the state that we always knew that it could have been. So for what it's worth, New Jersey legal weed businesses near 3 dozen stores in summer 2023. As of this month, there were 30 dispensaries cleared to offer both rec and med sales, as well as 3 sites open solely for rec cannabis sales. And there's a bit more, as by April, the New Jersey CRC had issued approvals to 51 retailers that would eventually also open as rec-only dispensaries. So this will be big once these finally come on and help drive more legal sales. But then last bit, so far, 16 counties have seen at least 1 rec dispensary open for business over a year since the first adult use sales begins. And so it seems like a lot more room for potential and growth, but happy to relay that New Jersey is starting to expand. And with that, this one from Raul Bali, I got this one as of June 14th. Update, Georgia Board of Pharmacy approves rules to allow independent pharmacies to sell medical cannabis products. So huge victory for Georgia, and citizens that need a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative could be on shelves by August. But I will admit, I think as of yesterday, I did see someone tweet that there might be a stay put on this decision because of another lawsuit. And so I don't know, but just wanted to share this for what it's worth. I will update you in the future, but this is as of June 14th, and we're recording as of June 17th. And so with that, though, on to this one from Connoisseurs. Florida Supreme Court extends their initial briefs deadline to June 26th for the review of the adult use cannabis ballot initiative. So promising that it's making a difficult argument for them, as no doubt the people of Florida do want adult use. I'm sure the majority will, if given the chance to vote on it. But so for what it's worth, just sharing this link in the description if you want to go through that. But again, lots coming at the end of June, about a week and a half away. With that, on to the Office of Medical Cannabis Use for this past week of Florida. If we look at dispensaries approved from June 12th to the 16th, we see a new dispensary open in Crystal River by Green Dragon, and then Sunnyside open a new dispensary in St. Petersburg, and they are backed by Cresco Labs. I do apologize, I don't know the brand that backs Green Dragon, but they're not one of the tier 1 MSOs. With that up to the qualified patient count, this past week they increased that up to 827,090 patients, which represents a week-over-week increase of 1,981. So good to see nearly 2,000 more patients recruited and getting access to that safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative. And so with that, all the data for the past week from June 9th to the 15th, all the MSOs that operate in the state, the number of active dispensary locations that they have, and then the number of milligrams of THC sold this past week, number of milligrams of CBD sold this past week, and ounces of smokable flower. So strong sales across the board in Florida while they're still medical only, and while they're not available yet, I will put the updated comp sheets in the comments. Just a different way to interpret this information, some nicer visuals, especially from connoisseurs.io. But with that, 2 stories out of New York, and I would actually consider this progress for this deeply troubled industry. But get this, so this is behind a paywall, unfortunately, but NewYorkUpstate.com, Carl Anderson, a first-round cannabis retail licensee, lays out his frustrations with government regulators as he struggles to open a dispensary in the Bronx. Finally, we're getting some first-hand stories, and this is the journalism we've needed out of New York, but a must-read story. This is my point. You don't want me to be successful, and he's talking to the Office of Cannabis Management in New York, and exactly what social equity means, making everyone equally poor, and he's essentially telling them how he feels. You're setting me up to fail so that way you can come in and swoop and take the license away from under me, and you say, we did our part, social equity-wise, we tried. And so I love that obviously publications are telling the other side of the story now, and hopefully we'll see some of these incompetent regulators held responsible and accountable and lose their jobs. And with this one from the Green Market Report, we're seeing the first of that as New York regulators struggle forward as 1 board member resigns. Despite the awarding of more than 200 licenses, again, handing out a license is different than actually facilitating the opening of dispensaries, and none of them have opened. Only 13 retailers are operational in the state, right? There's certainly nothing to be proud of, but as of now, we have our first incompetent Marxist that has bitten the dust and been fired. And so this is Ruben McDaniel, but get this, who pledged to continue working closely with the Office of Cannabis Management in his other state role as CEO of the Dormitory Authority of the State of New York. You can't make this shit up. No, you need to fire this guy from all of his roles. Though McDaniel didn't give a reason for his departure, and if you look at New York, you can clearly see why, because he was terrible at his job. It's a move that has been building for a while as criticism of his dual roles has increased in recent months. McDaniel says it has been a tremendous honor to destroy New York and serve as a member of the Cannabis Control Board, and we will continue to work in partnership to support the entrepreneurs as they open dispensaries around the state. Dude, you're living in a completely different reality. come down to earth, please. And so you can pause to read a bit more of the details of how he has screwed up New York. But with that, on to Maryland. MJ Biz Daily reports Maryland cannabis regulators suspend Cookies Baltimore license. And so while I'm not a shareholder of TerraSend or Cookies, this is unfortunate news, as the June 2nd suspension comes less than a week after the medical cannabis dispensary's grand opening in Baltimore and about a month before the widely anticipated July 1st launch of adult use cannabis sales in the state of Maryland. And so that sucks for them. The alleged violations of state law include operational failure, risking diversion, or endangering health that appear to be at least in part related to a cannabis smoke blower that's become a Cookies brand staple. The fun police strike again, according to documents posted on the Maryland Cannabis Administrative website. But I mean, there's rules that you have to follow, and you know them. Obviously, try not to violate them as blatantly as possible. But so this is essentially more on the story. Otherwise, you can grab the full link in the description from this one or the one on New York. But with that, out of Washington, as Marijuana Moment reports, Washington spends $100 million to vacate 350,000 cannabis drug convictions and reimburse people criminalized by institutional law. This is very ambitious and interesting experiment. Hopefully, they can do this well and not have too much of the money be diverted into places that it doesn't belong and taken advantage of. But I imagine a lot of this has come from the tax dollars that they've collected. And so fair enough, Washington, try it out. Hopefully you can do it well. The funds will help facilitate the relief in coordination with local courts, county clerks, public defenders, prosecutors, impacted individuals, advocacy groups, and other stakeholders. So lots of people to benefit from this, but at the same time, lots of potential for the funds to be misallocated. And so hopefully those go into the right pockets to help those in Washington that want their lives back and should have gotten it a long time ago. And so it'll hopefully make it easier for those individuals and how they're going to divvy up the money. Under recently enacted legislation, state will provide $47 million in funding to facilitate a comprehensive review and vacation of hundreds of thousands of felony drug possessions and misdemeanor cannabis possession records, while another $50 will be used to reimburse eligible individuals for court-ordered fines and costs, also known as legal financial obligations. And so again, very ambitious, but when you have an excess of tax dollars from legalizing cannabis, you can do what you want with it. And so with that, onto some MSO news. Green Thumb to open Rise Dispensary Philadelphia, its 82nd retail location in the nation on June 17th. So good to see Green Thumb expanding as they continue to focus with their heads down, keep working despite what's happening on the temporary scoreboards and the share prices. And so if you're interested, you can pause to read about what Green Thumb is doing, and I'll scroll down a little bit more just so you don't have to grab the full link in the description. And if you're interested, we got this one from Business Wire as Cresco Labs opens Sunnyside, Destin, and St. Petersburg, Florida stores, expanding nationwide retail footprint to 66 locations. So good to see Cresco Labs expanding. I am a shareholder of Cresco Labs, so this does interest me, as well as the awaited news that we're supposed to get by the end of June as to whether or not their deal with Columbia Care will go through. And I'm optimistic that it will, because I do think it is in the best interest of both parties to get it done. And so for what it's worth, if you are interested in Cresco Labs or you are an existing shareholder, you can obviously pause to read the full story or grab the link in the description. While Acreage provides an update, further streamlines leadership and oversight in preparation for expected acquisition by Canopy USA. I didn't read through this, honestly. I just wanted to share this because there's an expected acquisition coming from Canopy USA, and that would require some sort of rescheduling at the top, most likely into Schedule 3 from my understanding, or descheduling. And so obviously I'm making some assumptions and speculating here, so take what I say with a grain of salt. But if you wanted to learn more about how they are further streamlining this in order to eventually be acquired by Canopy, definitely pause to read a bit more, and then I'll scroll down a little bit so you can read the rest. Otherwise, full link in the description if you wanted to go through that yourself. And so some visuals just to share. The Weed CFO shared this one from BDSA. BDS believes that virtually all growth over the next 5 years will come from new markets that have recently come online as of 2020. And so I think that's very promising, because as we look at some of these more mature markets, we see them losing some of their growth and declining, but that's to be expected. Fortunately, by that time, less than 20 states had legalized for adult use, meaning 30 states still had to reform their laws, and many of those states had large swaths of population, meaning that a lot more of the growth that we've yet to see is still to come from new states, especially like Florida and Texas. And so pre-2020 is represented by the light blue, seeing a lot of the growth already added to the annual sales that we do see, obviously cash sales that should be brought into the banking system, but then with that in the dark blue is the sales growth that's expected to come in the coming years when all these new markets do come online. And so pre-2020 markets, the more mature ones, are seeing a compounded annual growth rate of just 3.2% heading into 2027, while these new markets coming online are expected to have a 17.7% growth rate. And so nice to see that after the last few years that we've been through. Well, I wanted to share this one from Jesse. Similar data, but just a different way of taking it in, as cannabis is a state-led growth story with a series of hard to-time political catalysts. In 2024-2025, BDSA expects 8 new states that represent 19.1% of the U.S. population to begin adult use sales, add in the potential for safe or rescheduling, and things look less gloomy. And so forecasts market launch dates, retail sales. Obviously, this is still speculation, but BDSA data is where it comes from. And so 2023, 2024, 2025, big years, not only for medical, but of course for adult use. Florida is going to be a massive one. And so with that, top 5 cannabis companies ranked by credit scores, another one from Green Market Report that I came across, figured I would share it as it comes from some Viridian data. The Viridian credit tracker said it utilizes 11 different bespoke credit ratios to evaluate 4 aspects of credit quality: liquidity, leverage, profitability, and size. And so of course this can vary, but apparently at this time, as of June 14th, the top 5 rated companies, US MSOs, were Green Thumb, Planet 13, Maramed, Vex Science, and Trulieve Cannabis, with number 6 and 7 being Verano and Cureleaf respectively, apparently. And so there's a bit more down here, but I invite you to pause, read if you're interested. Otherwise, you can grab the full link in the description. And then this is just an image of it. Figured I would pull it up if you can see from that. I think there's another full list that I'll try and find and put in the description as well under this one. But so with that, from the Dales report, NCAA signals support for removing cannabis from banned substances list. Love to see the NCAA getting on board, following what the NFL is doing, as it's signaling support for removing cannabis from its association's banned list of substances and testing protocols. In order to do this, each of the 3 divisional governance bodies of the NCAA need to introduce and adopt legislation. It's great news for all student athletes across the country, and hopefully this doesn't take too long to implement, as they seek support from the Board of Governors as well to stop testing for cannabis at the NCAA championship events while legislative action is considered. Yes, let these top-tier athletes live their lives, have fun, and recover with a great medicinal alternative to opioids. As they claim it's not a performance-enhancing drug, yes, I would agree. It's a flower. It's a herb that not only helps with recovery, but if some athletes, like for example, if Le'Veon Bell, want to use it before they play, they happen to sometimes put up stellar numbers too. So who are you to judge? On to some studies. This one from Leafly. I think it's recycling the Australian study that was published in an Australian article that I put on Wednesday, but nonetheless, good to see more outlets sharing this information, as I just find this funny. Real cannabis, you mean cannabis flower, the medicine itself. Don't know why they need to call it real cannabis, worked in rare study on chronic pain. I guess it's because of all these unfortunate synthetic knockoffs that are being created, but yeah, no doubt cannabis flower, the OG, is what we all know and love. But so this Australian study published in the journal Drug Science, Policy, and Law found significant reductions in pain and notable increases in quality of life. While these results are still preliminary, the authors state they are promising and indicate significant improvements in pain, quality of life, sleep, and mood. Where have you seen this before, right? Probably on some of the many other studies I've shared, and so the puns never end. Studying chronic for chronic pain, you can pause to read a little bit more. Otherwise, full link in the description. But real pain patients using real weed. It's just like, man, we need some intelligent stoners just writing this like professionals, as opposed to these ridiculous people using puns as if they don't go out of fashion. And so this one from Springer Link: clinical outcome data of anxiety patients treated with cannabis-based medicinal products in the United Kingdom. This is as of June 14th, 2023, a cohort study from the UK Medical Cannabis Registry. And another issue with this one, it's a very small study. Obviously, could have been a larger sample size, but harder to do with cannabis. I imagine they need more funding in order to get that. But results speak for themselves, and conclusions down here. Prescriptions of cannabis-based medical products in those with GAD, which is generalized anxiety disorder, is associated with clinically significant improvements in anxiety with an acceptable safety profile in a real-world setting. Read it and read. Enough to deschedule already, but randomized trials are required as the next step to investigate the efficacies of CBMPs, right? More studies, more kicking the can down the road before we can actually do what we know we should have done all along. Quite sad, but last one from Medical Express: cannabis compound CBD found in common Brazilian shrub. This is fascinating because it's found in a different plant that's not cannabis. Say what? So scientists have discovered cannabidiol, a compound in marijuana known as CBD, in a common Brazilian plant, opening potential new avenues to produce the increasingly popular substance, a lead researcher said Thursday. And, more reason to normalize the cannabis plant and less reason to stigmatize it still, because you can find CBD in other plants. More reason to just normalize CBD, as the team found CBD in fruits and flowers of a plant known as Trema micrantha bloom, a shrub which grows across much of South American country and is often considered a weed. Molecular biologist Rodrigo Miro Neto of Federal University of Rio de Janeiro told AFP. Not surprising at all, it's considered a weed, much like other sources of CBD in the past. But yeah, more down here if you wanted to pause to read. I don't want this video to be too long, but it's a legal alternative to using cannabis as well. Hopefully, that's more reason to deschedule the plant and treat cannabis like this other shrub, as opposed to continuing to discriminate against the miracle plant that we all know and love. But full link in the description if you wanted to read through that. But last few stories, This was published this week from the EU Drugs Agency. At least shared the story, but the EU Drugs Report 2023, Trends and Developments. Just published our analysis of the latest data on the drug situation and responses to it. So I'll put the link in the description if you wanted to check it out. But ironically enough, out of all this, do you notice one of probably the most popular and consumed drug in the world not mentioned on here? Alcohol. Because for whatever reason, the EU does not consider alcohol a drug. You cannot make this shit up. Alcohol is a drug, right? And so what planet are they living on? For mysterious reasons, the EU does not consider alcohol a drug. Yet, I think the other important takeaway is that when you go through this and you click on cannabis and you go through all the data, not one person has died from it. And so again, how they can live in this alternative reality where alcohol is fine and they can continue demonizing cannabis makes no sense. And so last few, this one from Jesse Redman. I did not get to listen to this yet, but I do want to because I want to learn more about the state of California cannabis and all the craziness going on there. And so it's an hour-long chat with two members of Glasshouse Brands, which is a single state operator. So these guys are clearly on the ground in the state, but at the same time, they are alleged to have sold cannabis to the black market. Hence, they're the ones facing that lawsuit. So take it with a grain of salt, but also they speak with Aaron Value, who writes a newsletter for Substack, and then Ananda Strategy, Hirsch Jane, one of my favorite California sources I've shared over the years. Nonetheless, though, you can grab the link in the description if you wanted to tune in. But last bit, we had this on Thursday evening. MJ Stock Trader spoke on safe banking with Don Murphy. And there's a lot of good stuff to take from this conversation as well. But just figured I would share a clip and scroll through some of these other posts that people have made. And Do the Right Thing seems to believe that this guy is spot on. Let's hope that this person is spot on. Although I don't think you can predict what X the catalyst can be. Obviously, bigger the better for us heavy bag holders. But I will just press play and let you listen.
Right, and in Ohio, Brown could end up sharing the ballot with cannabis legalization, right? If
Exactly.
this either in 2024 or, foolishly, in my opinion, if they try to roll this thing in 2023 in an off-year election, they could end up losing. But they could win, and then it's legal, and then everybody's pointing at Brown and saying, like, how come we didn't get saved? Because you didn't bring it for a vote.
That's true odds
Not a good
incentive right there.
position to be in if I'm advising.
Is this time different?
Yeah, well, we have people on here, and we usually get a few thousand people listen to this. So I like how you tweet
But,
out
folks,
the link to the
pick up the
co-sponsors,
phone
and you
and call
basically
if
said,
you can.
if your guy's on there,
Please.
call them and say thank you for
Please.
supporting Safe. If not on there, call them and tell them why they should.
Need it now more than ever.
Right. And you know what? I'll go one further. If you can't pick up the phone and make 2 phone calls to a 20-year-old who's going to answer the phone, come on, like give me some help. That's all I'm asking. I'm not asking for money. I'm just asking for 2 phone calls. Call these people up, your senators, and say thank you, or this is why I want you to do this, and this is why it's important, and at least do that. Because if they're not hearing from you, then it's not a priority.
Yeah, and they do these phone call counts, right? When they do these, I know I've talked to a few congressmen and senators, and these assistants, they pick up the phone. They actually will mark what the topics people are calling about, and then when they start to meet with their senator or congressman, they tell them like, hey, this one's got the most phone calls, so you need to so they do know and they do get that. So it's very important to make the call. Especially, if you don't live in that area, a lot of times they'll ask you where you're from or where you're. So make sure you live in the area. Tell your friends you know in that area. Make a phone call because it does get these little check marks on these tally sheets. And then when they meet with the senator, they actually do tell them what the most phone calls got.
Right. And when Don Murphy stops by and says, hey, Senator, you got a minute to talk about safe banking? And he says, well, as a matter of fact, I do now because people back home care about it. It's now on my radar. Right. Like, I know you've got like 15,000 followers. Imagine if we could turn your followers onto a handful of members and just carpet bomb their phones. Like if I could blow up their phones, if you could blow up their phones, you could do just about anything.
Well said, Don. So, folks, the time is now. Blow up their phones if you can. Give them reasons. Get $30 billion in cash off the streets. It'll make America safer, so these dispensaries are no longer targets for armed robberies. It'll stop discriminating against the industry, help normalize it, and getting it into the banking system so they can pay their tax on time. A lot of benefits, of course. So, try and do that if you can. If you're American, it's times like this I wish I was, but thank you, MJ Stock Trader, for hosting Don, and thank you, Don, for sharing your wisdom with us. But that is it for today's episode, folks. So, I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Wednesday for a midweek update. Have a great weekend, everybody. Take care.